Officer Jake Mitchell thought he'd put an arrogant black woman in her place. Just another routine day of throwing his weight around. But tomorrow morning, when he walks into that courtroom, his entire career will explode in front of him. The autumn rain pounded the courthouse parking lot. Officer Jake Mitchell was having a terrible day. His coffee spilled. His captain chewed him out. Traffic made him late. And now some woman had taken his spot. His spot. The one he'd parked in for 12 years. Maria Thompson stepped out of her sedan, professional but tired. She'd been in depositions all day. All she wanted was to get inside, file her papers, and go home. "Hey!" Jake shouted, striding toward her. "You can't park here!" Maria looked up, confused. "I'm sorry. This is a police spot. Move your car. Now!" She glanced at the sign. No police marking, just regular visitor parking. "Officer, this isn't marked as—" "Don't tell me what's marked." His voice rose, sharp and cutting. "I know this lot better than you ever will. You people think you can just—" "Excuse me?" Maria's spine straightened. "You people?" Jake's face flushed. He knew he'd said it. That phrase, the one that revealed everything simmering underneath. But he was too angry to care. Too used to getting his way. "Yeah, you heard me. Coming here in your fancy car, acting like you own the place. Well, you don't. Now move it before I write you a citation." Maria stayed calm. She'd dealt with this kind of harassment before. Too many times. "I have every right to park here. If you have an issue, call a supervisor." "I am the supervisor out here." Jake stepped closer, invading her space, trying to intimidate. "Don't make me escalate this situation." But Maria didn't back down. And what she said next made Jake's blood boil even more. "Officer," Maria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm an attorney. I know my rights, and I know when someone is overstepping theirs." Jake laughed, bitter, mocking. "Oh, you're a lawyer. Let me guess. Ambulance chaser? Divorce settlements? Yeah, real impressive." The prejudice dripped from every word. The assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly be anything more. That she didn't belong here. That she was somehow less than. Maria felt the familiar sting. She'd graduated top of her class, clerked for a federal judge, spent 15 years building a reputation for fairness and integrity. But to men like Jake, she'd always just be, "You people. I'm simply trying to do my job, officer, just like you should be doing yours." "Don't lecture me about my job." Jake's hand moved to his ticket book, his power move. "You know what? Expired registration. That's a violation. My registration is current. Show me." Maria reached into her car for her paperwork. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from rage, from the exhaustion of always having to prove herself, always having to stay calm while others could explode. She handed him the documents. Everything current, everything in order. Always was. Jake barely glanced at them. Looks suspicious to me. I'm going to need to verify this." "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. Stay here." He walked back to his patrol car, taking his time, making her wait, making her feel small. This was about control, about putting someone in what he thought was their proper place. Maria stood in the rain, water soaked through her blazer, her court papers getting damp. She had a brief to file, a deadline. But Jake didn't care about that. This was personal for him. Even though they'd never met before, to him she was just another black woman who needed to be reminded of the pecking order. What Jake didn't know? Maria had spent her entire life being underestimated, being judged by her skin before her skill, and she'd learned something valuable along the way. Patience, strategy, and the knowledge that the truth always comes out. 20 minutes later, Jake sauntered back. "You're free to go. This time." Maria took her documents. "This time, consider it a warning. Next time, show some respect." She wanted to scream, to tell him exactly what she thought of his abuse of power, his thinly veiled racism, his need to dominate. But Maria Thompson had learned another lesson in her rise through the legal system. Sometimes silence is the strongest response. Because tomorrow morning, Jake Mitchell would learn exactly who Maria Thompson really was, and the look on his face would be worth every second of tonight's humiliation. Jake walked into courtroom 6 with his usual swagger. He was testifying today in a traffic case. Simple. Routine. He'd done it 100 times. The defendant had been clocked doing 50 in a 35 zone. Clear violation, open and shut. Jake took his seat in the witness area, nodding at the prosecutor. The defense attorney looked young, nervous. This would be quick. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Maria Thompson presiding. Jake stood out of habit, not paying attention. Judges were all the same to him. Authority figures, sure, but he was law enforcement. They were on the same team. Then she walked in. The world tilted. That woman, from the parking lot, in judicial robes. Maria's eyes met his for just a fraction of a second. No emotion, no recognition. She simply took her seat at the bench with the same quiet dignity she'd shown last night in the rain. Jake's throat went dry. His hands started to sweat. This couldn't be happening. She was a judge. Be seated, Maria said, her voice calm and professional. Case number 47, TRC 9854. Officer Mitchell, I see you're the arresting officer. Please approach and be sworn in. Jake's legs felt like concrete. He walked to the witness stand, his mind racing. Should he say something? Apologize? Explain? The clerk held out the Bible. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. His voice cracked slightly. Maria opened the case file, still not looking directly at him. Officer Mitchell, please state your name and badge number for the record. Jake Mitchell, badge 2847. Thank you. Now, Officer Mitchell, she paused, finally raising her eyes to meet his. Let's talk about your conduct during this traffic stop. The prosecutor began his questions. Standard stuff. Time of day, location, speed measured. Jake answered on autopilot, but his attention was locked on Maria. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, professional, composed, giving no indication of last night's encounter. Then came the defense attorney's turn. The kid stood up, shuffling papers nervously. Officer Mitchell, you claim my client was driving recklessly, but you also noted it was raining heavily that night. Visibility was poor. How can you be certain of the speed? I used radar. It's accurate regardless of weather. And where exactly were you positioned? In the courthouse parking lot. Maria's pen stopped moving, just for a second. The courthouse parking lot, the defense attorney continued. Isn't that an unusual location for traffic enforcement? Jake shifted in his seat. I happened to be there on other business. What business? Just checking the area. Maria leaned forward slightly. Officer Mitchell, the court would like to understand this as well. What were you doing in the courthouse lot at 6:47 p.m.? Court had closed at 5. Jake felt the trap closing. I was addressing a parking violation. A parking violation? Maria's tone remained neutral, but there was something underneath. At 6:47 p.m.? In an empty lot? Yes, Your Honor. And did you issue a citation for this violation? No, Your Honor. I gave a warning. I see. Maria made a note. Continue with your questions, counselor. The defense attorney smelled blood in the water. Officer Mitchell, isn't it true that you were upset about someone parking in a spot you considered yours, and that you took out your frustration by looking for someone to cite? Objection. The prosecutor jumped up. Speculation. Sustained, Maria said. Rephrase. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted. Jake wasn't some neutral enforcer of the law. He was someone with a temper, someone who let personal feelings influence his professional judgment. The questions continued, each one peeling back another layer. Jake's answers grew shorter, more defensive. Finally, Maria called a recess. Officer Mitchell, please remain. Everyone else will resume in 15 minutes. The courtroom cleared. Just Jake and Maria remained, separated by the bench. The judge and the cop. The power dynamic from last night completely reversed. Maria removed her glasses. Officer Mitchell, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I expect an honest answer. Do you recognize me? Jake's mouth went dry. Yes, Your Honor. From where? The parking lot. Last night. And did you treat me with respect and professionalism during that encounter? Silence. Officer Mitchell, I asked you a question. I, I may have been having a bad day. A bad day. Maria's voice stayed level, but Jake heard the steel underneath. So when you have a bad day, you harass citizens, use your authority to intimidate, make assumptions about people based on what exactly? Jake knew what she was asking. And they both knew he couldn't say it out loud. Not here, not on the record. But the question hung in the air like smoke. Maria continued, her voice measured. Let me tell you something, Officer Mitchell. I've been practicing law for 22 years. I've faced prejudice in ways you cannot imagine. I've had opposing counsel assume I was the court reporter. I've had security guards follow me in department stores. I've had police officers pull me over for driving while black in neighborhoods where I had every right to be. Jake started to speak, but she held up a hand. I'm not finished. Through all of that, I never let it break me. I studied harder, worked longer hours, proved myself over and over again because that's what I had to do. Not what I should have had to do, but what I had to do. She stood walking down from the bench. This wasn't Judge Thompson speaking anymore. This was Maria, the woman who'd stood in the rain last night, maintaining her dignity while being disrespected. I became a judge because I believe in justice. Real justice. Not the kind that depends on skin color or assumptions or who knows who. The kind that looks at facts, at evidence, at the content of someone's character, not the color of their skin. The words echoed, deliberate, a reference Jake couldn't miss. Now I could recuse myself from this case, claim bias because of our encounter. But you know what? That would be letting you off easy. That would be running from the very prejudice that makes encounters like last night possible. Maria walked closer to the witness stand. Instead, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to evaluate this case on its merits. I'm going to look at whether you, as an officer of the law, conducted yourself with the integrity and professionalism that badge demands. She paused, letting it sink in. The prosecutor has presented his evidence. The defense has raised legitimate questions about your state of mind, about whether you were enforcing the law or enforcing your ego. Jake's face burned. Your Honor, I've reviewed the dash cam footage from your patrol car. The timestamp shows 6:52 p.m., just minutes after our encounter in the parking lot. The defendant's car passed you going 41 miles per hour, not 50. The courtroom seemed to shrink. You inflated the speed, Officer Mitchell. Why? Because you were angry? Because you needed to feel powerful after a woman stood up to you? Because she didn't finish. Didn't need to. Jake slumped in his chair. I made a mistake in my report. A mistake? That's what you're calling it? I was angry, not thinking clearly. And that anger, Officer Mitchell, where did it come from? A black woman took a parking spot? A black woman questioned your authority? A black woman existed in a space you felt belonged to you? I'm not a racist. The words burst out before Jake could stop them. Maria's expression didn't change. I never said you were. But racism isn't always burning crosses and hate speeches. Sometimes it's assumptions. It's the casual you people. It's seeing someone's skin and deciding you already know their story, their worth, their place. She walked back to the bench. You want to know something? I'm going to tell you a story. When my son was 16, he was stopped by police. He'd done nothing wrong. He was walking home from his friend's house at 8 p.m. But an officer saw a young black teenager in a nice neighborhood and decided he didn't belong. Jake shifted uncomfortably. They put him against a wall, searched him, demanded to know what he was really doing there. My son, straight A student, debate team captain, never been in trouble, came home shaking, crying, feeling like a criminal in his own neighborhood. Maria's voice cracked slightly, the first emotion she'd shown. That officer probably went home thinking he'd done his job, kept the neighborhood safe. He probably never thought about my son again. But my son, he thinks about it every day, every time he sees a police car, every time he walks down the street. She looked directly at Jake. That's why I became a judge. Not for revenge, for change. To make sure that when officers stand in my courtroom, They understand that every person they interact with is someone's child, someone's parent, someone who deserves dignity. The silence was heavy. Now, regarding this case, Maria's voice returned to its professional tone. Based on the evidence, including the inflated speed report and the officer's admitted compromised state of mind, I'm dismissing all charges against the defendant. The defense attorney let out a breath he'd been holding. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential perjury charges against Officer Mitchell. Filing a false report is a serious offense, one that undermines the entire justice system. Jake's world crumbled. Your Honor, please. I'm also recommending you undergo mandatory bias training and psychological evaluation before returning to active duty. Not as punishment, Officer Mitchell, as an opportunity. But Maria wasn't done. What she said next would change everything, not just for Jake, but for the entire police department. Maria gathered her papers, then looked up one more time. There's something else the court needs to address. This case isn't isolated. It's symptomatic. She pulled out a folder. Thick, well-organized. The kind of preparation that comes from years of legal practice. Over the past 6 months, I've been reviewing traffic citations from this precinct. I noticed a pattern. Black drivers were stopped at a rate 3 times higher than white drivers in the same areas. Similar violations, minor speeding, expired tags, broken taillights, resulted in arrests for black citizens, but warnings for white citizens 68% of the time. The prosecutor shifted nervously. This was going beyond one case. I've documented 18 instances where officers from your precinct demonstrated clear bias in their enforcement. Some subtle, some, like Officer Mitchell's conduct last night, overt. Jake wanted to disappear, to be anywhere but here. Now, I'm not saying every officer in that precinct is consciously racist. Many probably believe they're just doing their jobs. But the data doesn't lie. The pattern is clear, and it stops today. Maria's voice grew stronger. This was the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Every slight she'd endured, every time she'd been underestimated, every moment she'd chosen to respond with excellence instead of anger. I'm issuing a court order mandating comprehensive bias training for the entire precinct. Not the superficial, check-the-box kind. Real training, with real accountability. Officers will undergo evaluation, procedures will be reviewed, and body camera footage will be randomly audited. She looked at Jake. You, Officer Mitchell, have a choice. You can see this as persecution, as political correctness run amok, as an attack on law enforcement, or you can see it as an opportunity to become the officer you probably wanted to be when you first put on that badge. For the first time since the hearing began, Maria's expression softened slightly. I don't think you're an evil person. I think you're a product of a system that's been broken for a very long time. A system that taught you that your authority was absolute, that questioning was disrespect, that some people deserved less consideration than others. Jake's eyes welled up. The weight of it all, his actions, their consequences, the realization of what he'd become, crashed down on him. Your Honor, he said quietly, I'm sorry. For last night. For today. For all of it. Maria nodded. Apologies are a start, Officer Mitchell, but they're meaningless without change. Real, sustained, uncomfortable change. She signed the order with a decisive stroke. This court is adjourned. As people filed out, Jake remained in his seat, broken, humiliated, but maybe, just maybe, beginning to understand. Maria approached him one last time, speaking softly so only he could hear. My son's name is Marcus. The officer who stopped him never learned it, never asked. To him, Marcus was just another suspicious black kid. But Marcus wants to be a civil rights attorney. He wants to fix the system from the inside. She paused. You have children, Officer Mitchell? Jake nodded. 2 daughters, 9 and 12. Then you understand. Every person you stop, every person you interact with, they're someone's child, someone's hope for the future. Treat them that way. She walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. 3 months later, Jake Mitchell completed his bias training. He requested a transfer to community policing, started coaching youth basketball in predominantly black neighborhoods, began the hard work of unlearning decades of unconscious prejudice. It wasn't redemption, not yet. That would take years, but it was a beginning. Maria Thompson continued her work on the bench, fighting for fairness one case at a time. She never forgot that night in the parking lot, how it felt to be demeaned, dismissed, dehumanized. But she also never forgot that justice isn't about revenge. It's about creating a system where the next black woman standing in the rain doesn't have to wait for the courthouse to prove her worth, where her humanity is recognized from the start. She kept that parking lot encounter as a reminder, not of what she'd endured, but of why she'd endured it. Because somewhere, a young black attorney was facing similar prejudice. Somewhere, a teenager was being stopped for walking while black. Somewhere, someone was being judged by their skin instead of their character. And because of judges like Maria, officers like the reformed Jake Mitchell, and a system slowly, painfully learning to do better, maybe, just maybe, the next encounter would be different. Maybe the next time, the officer would see the person first. The badge, the authority, the power. They all meant nothing if they weren't used to protect everyone equally, to serve with genuine respect, to enforce laws without enforcing prejudice. That parking spot Maria took? She still parks there sometimes, a quiet reminder of how far she's come and how far society still has to go. But every morning she walks into that courthouse, she carries with her the stories of those who couldn't fight back, those who were never given a courtroom to make their case, those whose dignity was stripped away with no judge to restore it. She carries them. She honors them, and she uses her power to make sure their voices are finally heard, because that's what justice really means. Not winning, not revenge, not even punishment. Justice means recognizing that every person, regardless of skin color, background, or the car they drive, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity. From a parking lot confrontation to a courtroom confrontation, Maria Thompson proves something important. You can't judge people by their appearance. You can't assume you know someone's story based on stereotypes. And you certainly can't underestimate the power of a person who spent their entire life overcoming prejudice. Officer Jake Mitchell learned that lesson the hard way. But the beauty of true justice? It offers everyone a chance to do better, to be better, to recognize our biases and work to overcome them. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt judged unfairly or witnessed prejudice that made your blood boil, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. And stick around. We've got more stories about people who refuse to let discrimination define them, who turned obstacles into opportunities, and who proved that character always outweighs prejudice in the end. See you in the next videos.